Oh yeah, it's the 2024 Ford Mustang GT with the Active Valve Exhaust system, which sounds amazing. Now here's the thing. The Mustang in behind me is just the regular 300A, but I had a hot take a couple of years ago where I said that for the previous gen Mustang, if you were hoping to get into a Mustang GT, the 300A was a good option. But I had some people like poking holes in that theory because you didn't get the selectable drive modes, there were no toggle switches, and then on top of that, you were stuck with the old school base sync media screen, which was kind of garbage. But you do have selectable drive modes now in the 2024. It might actually be a good option for people because you can get the active valve system, GT Performance Pack, and a number of other features. So it's going to be a matter of what's your budget. Inside of the Mustang, you're still going to find the option for 17, 18, 19, or 20-inch wheels with varying styles, just depending on which trim level of the vehicle that you're in and which packages that you've added on. This one is the Nite Pony package, which is why it's this 19-inch blacked out instead. There is the option for the bronze appearance package, which gives you some pretty sharp-looking bronze wheels, but that one's going to be a matter of preference. I think the black ones look sharp, but that's on me. You could always hydro dip them if you wanted something different or find something aftermarket. One thing that's standard now inside of the GT Mustang is that you are going to find Brembo brake pads for the front end. And then obviously as you get into the high performance package EcoBoost or you get into the GT Performance Pack, those are going to be 6-piston versus 4-piston instead. But it is kind of cool to see that you've got Brembo's standard for the GT lineup now. I think that's a great choice on Ford's part. But the overall styling on the fender isn't too different. It's when you really get into the front end, or if you look at like the butt end of this thing, where it looks slightly different from last year compared to this year. You've got the black hood scoop there, which looks pretty neat when you've got the hood up, because you can see what's going on, but we'll touch on that one in a second. Front LED headlamps are going to be standard. Not going to find the option for fog lamps inside of this thing whatsoever. And then some other tech you're just not going to find inside of the Mustang like you will in some other Ford vehicles. The forward sensing system and front-facing camera are never going to be available in the Mustang. There's a nice glossy highlight in the middle part of the grille, and because this is the Nite Pony package, blacked out pony in the very middle. I think that blacked out look is really, really sharp though. And off to the left side, I just pull to the left, and it's on. Ugh. Hydraulics, which is amazing. Then you've got this, the 5-liter Coyote V8 engine that's been reworked from the 23 to the 2024 model. The Mustang in general, you're going to find it with either the 2.3 EcoBoost, the Coyote 5-liter V8, and then inside of the Dark Horse, it's the same Coyote V8, but it also does feature an air cooling system. But power-wise, this thing, complete night and day difference from the 2023 model. So this thing now pushes out 480 or 486 horsepower, and then 415 or 418 pound-feet of torque. And there's a little bit of an asterisk there, because in order to achieve those horsepower and torque numbers, they're all achieved using a premium fuel. So you have to use a 93 to get it, and in order to get the max numbers, you also need the Active Valve Performance Exhaust. You've got a nice engine cover inside of the 5-liter V8. Because this doesn't have the GT Performance Pack, you're not going to find a strut tower brace, but that is available when you get into some of the higher packaged options in the EcoBoost as well as the GT. You're going to find the Mustang with a few different types of transmissions available. So the Coyote V8 that we're looking at is going to be a 6-speed manual transmission standard, and that's the MT82 GetRag D4, so the same transmission that we saw last year. Then there's also the 10-speed automatic transmission. Now, if you're not crazy about getting the MT82, you could do an aftermarket Tremec upgrade. You're probably looking $6,000-8,000 roughly to do that aftermarket upgrade, or you could look at the Dark Horse instead that includes it standard. But more than enough space if you wanted to do some aftermarket cooling, throw on a supercharger, whatever the case may be. And then just typical Ford styling, if you're doing some things yourself, easily top up the fluid, you can easily change oil, easy access to the battery. You can check your oil and then top up fluids as necessary. So you just want to make sure you're regularly maintaining it, regularly change your oil as well. Try not to push it for the first 500-ish kilometers or so, but outside of that, open her up and have a little bit of fun. Because this thing pushes out a little bit more power and you can feel it. You're going to find a few options for the final drive ratio inside of the Mustang. So it goes up to a 3.73 inside of the manual, but that's going to be if you're looking at the GT Performance Pack. And it's going to go from a standard rear axle ratio to a torsion. So it's a 355 in the 10-speed auto versus a 373 inside of the 6-speed when you get that GT performance pack. But I mean, the final drive ratio, that's essentially the number of times that the drive shaft has to spin for the wheels to spin once. General rule of thumb, the higher that number, the better your launch is going to be, but it's also going to negatively impact your fuel economy. So if your plan is to track it, the 373 in the GT performance pack is pretty good. And you also get a boatload of other features inside of that package as well. So you're going to get things like the K-brace, there's unique chassis tuning, E-Pass tuning, ABS tuning. It's going to be slightly different in the Dark Horse too. But there are so many other things that you get. You're going to have 6-piston calipers for the front brakes, so it's just improved performance overall. If you're never going to track your Mustang, you could probably do without it. Like, it does give you slightly nicer wheels and also a different spoiler. But I mean, if you're never going to track it, I wouldn't really necessarily say it's a big thing to look at. One thing to consider if you are going to track it is the MagneRide damping system, which is still available inside of the Mustang. The MagneRide system is great because it's like a magnetic particle fluid inside of the suspension system. And when you go left, right quickly, it's going to stiffen up the suspension to help reduce body roll. Filling up fuel inside of the Mustang is still just along the driver's side, capless system, and it's also got anti-siphon technology built in. If you want the truest possible performance inside of this thing, you're ideally using a 91 or a 93 octane. I know gas prices right now are a little bit crazy, so if you're concerned about fuel prices, minimum manufacturer's recommendation is technically just 87. But it's going to affect your overall performance. It'll drop about 2 to 3-ish%. So it's not a huge drop, but if you want the best possible performance out of this thing, you're definitely going to want to use a 91, ideally a 93 if you've got it in the budget though. There's one standard piece of technology you're going to find in the back end of the Mustang now, regardless of whether you're looking at the EcoBoost or the GT. Reverse sensing system is always going to be here. You're always going to find the backup camera as well, and then there are sequential LED turn lights. There are a few different types of spoilers that you're going to find in the Mustang, whether you're in the EcoBoost, the GT, Performance Package, Dark Horse, etc. This is just the regular deck lid spoiler, but there is the option for ones that are slightly higher, and then a boatload of options that are available aftermarket if you're looking for something a little bit more unique. This thing, because it's the GT, is quad tip exhaust. This one also features active valve exhaust. But before I let you listen, one cool thing about the active valve exhaust system is that Borla actually has some tips that are compatible with the exhaust system. So if you wanted to do something aftermarket to give it a little bit more of a unique sound, you'd have that opportunity, which is incredible. But like I said, this thing has active valve, so let's have a little listen. So that's pretty damn nice. I love the rumble, how it sounds. I love the way that it works. It's a beautiful system. Now, get active valve exhaust from the factory. There is nothing even remotely close available aftermarket. So if you want the active valve system, get it at time of ordering from the factory. If you're contemplating a Mustang on a dealer lot and it doesn't have active valve and that's a feature you want, put in a factory order. Trust me on this one, you are going to thank yourself because of just the added sound that you get. It's the rumble of the Coyote, but it's just so much better with the active valve system. Like I said, you do have to get it from the factory in order for it to work. Now, getting into the trunk of this thing, you've got a few options. Just to the left-hand side of the steering wheel, there's a release there. You can use the key fob. And then just underneath this rear GT badge, if you trace your hand down, you can push a little button in order to open this thing up. There's nothing really off to the left side. Off to the right side, because this is just the base 300, there's nothing there. But when you get into the upgraded 12-speaker system, you would find a subwoofer in the back. Now this is just the regular carpeted liner. And then lifting up, there is a mini spare tire on top of that. And then you're also going to find the little white spigot, so if you ever need to fill up using a jerry can. Like I said, this thing has the mini spare tire. The jack is located just underneath the tire. So if you wanted to change the tire out yourself, you could, but being a Ford owner, you do have access to Ford roadside assistance. And that's the same coverage for essentially the powertrain warranty. So 5 years, 60,000 mile or 100,000 kilometers. So you can call an 800 number to get a tire change, winching, if you need fuel delivery, battery jumping, and a few other things. But some versions of the Mustang will have the mini spare. Some versions of the Mustang will have the Goop instead. It's going to depend on which packages you've added on. But some of them do have that spare, which is nice. And there actually is a pretty good amount of space back here. One thing to point out, inside of the convertible, the second row seats are locked into place. There's no way to fold them down. But when you're inside of the fastback, so the hardtop, you can hop inside and shoot yourself to the back in order to be able to open this thing up. And when you do, it has a pretty solid amount of space in it, like a surprising amount of space. But if you want a convertible review, I just did one. You'll find it down in the description of this video. Along the driver's side door, side view mirrors still do feature the blind spot monitoring system, manual folding side view. You still do have intelligent access along the door, so you can push there to lock the doors, slide your hand in order to unlock, as long as you've got the key fob on you. Right along the door, it's got this like cloth material into this like woven texture. It honestly it's not carbon fiber. It almost feels and looks like it though, but that wraps through part of the dash as you go down the center stack, even through the steering wheel. It's really solid. Just your regular unlock lock buttons. This thing does have the option for seat memory when you get into some of the higher trim levels of the vehicle. Got this nice stitching that follows through, matches what's going on with the seat. You're going to find a scuff plate there, with it being slightly different when you get into the premium versions of the Mustang. It's a nice little Easter egg along the sides. You can see their little pony. So this like weave texture that follows through the dash feels great, looks solid. Series of different buttons that are available here. So this one's your trunk release. Figure out what's going on with your running lamps. Honestly, I always just recommend being in the auto setting unless you always want to have your high beams on, in which case you want to be on your regular light setting there instead. You can increase or decrease the brightness of the cluster screen. Steering wheel inside of this thing is going to be a manual telescoping across the board. And one thing, slightly disappointed, is that this is for your sunglasses holder, which is now moved to the top of the car instead. So inside of the convertible, some versions of the Mustang still do have the cutout along the side there. But unfortunately, a number of them have it moved up to the top instead. I miss that. That's one of the small highlights that I wish that Ford had kept. This is the 6-speed manual transmission, so you've got your clutch, just your base pedals there, but there is the option for some aluminum pedals instead, which look fairly sharp in comparison. The first row inside of the Mustang is solid, and the seats are actually surprisingly comfortable inside of this thing. Now, inside of oh, interesting. I was expecting the GT, so the base seat, to just be a 2-way adjustable headrest. 4-way adjustable. So you need to create that perfect position for your head, and that is available there, which is great. A few different types of seat material that are available in the Mustang. So it's either cloth seats, like what we're looking at here. There's ActiveX seating material, and then there's also true leather seats on top of that. You will also find the Recaros in the Mustang still. So the thing that I love about the Recaros is how comfortable they are. If you're going to be tracking your Mustang, it is a beautiful seat, but there's a downside to the Recaro. And that's that if you're in the premium version of the Mustang, you'd have heated and ventilated first row seats. And that's whether you're in the EcoBoost or the GT. But the downside is that when you're in the Recaro seats, you're just not going to have heated ventilated seats available as an option whatsoever. I mean, obviously not a big deal if you're going to track your Mustang, but if you want to use it as a regular daily driver, I'd probably skip the Recaro seats because you're going to lose out on that heated ventilated capability, which, I mean, when you're on days like, especially like today, it's like 32 Celsius, it is very, very useful having a ventilated first row seat. And in the wintertime, if you're driving your Mustang year round, definitely useful to have that for the heated first row seats. Now, one interesting thing, I guess, about wintertime driving is that if you are planning on driving your Mustang year round, it's definitely doable. Until you start getting a bit of snow, then I'd probably skip it. But if it's just regular cold driving, a tiny bit of snow, a little bit icy, you're going to be okay for the most part. I'd recommend at least getting winter tires though. So the rubber in all seasons versus the rubber in winter tires is different. So if you are going to be driving your Mustang year round, even if you're in a place where you don't really get much snow, I'd still recommend looking at aftermarket wheels and tires. So winter tires for sure, but aftermarket wheels like Steely's, 100% would recommend. Because the downside is that if you use the same wheels, so the same rims, for your summer tires, your winter tires, whatever the case may be, if you're constantly swapping back and forth, eventually you're going to end up leading to a degradation of the wall quality of the actual rubber. Just had to show you that beautiful startup, but I'm going to turn this thing off just because it gets a little bit loud. Just going to go into accessory mode here. Beautiful. Love the new look. It's going to, honestly, I think it's going to take a lot of people to get used to, but if you were a big fan of the fully digital cluster in last year's model, you're going to like this. There are technically two different options that are available here. So it's still going to be the same Sync 4 media screen, but there's one with factory nav, one without. And then there's also a little connecting piece that's going to be right in the middle there instead of having them just like two fully separate screens. But let's go through some basics. Steering wheel inside of this thing is really nice. I like the new flat bottom element of it. And then that nice, like almost like carbon fiber texture follows all the way throughout the steering wheel itself. Classic pony right in the very middle. You're always going to have a manual telescoping steering wheel inside of this thing. There's also the option for the Ford Co-Pilot 360 Assist Plus package, which gives the adaptive cruise control, factory nav, and a few other options. But this one just has regular cruise control. Left stick there is for your high beams. Right stick is for your windshield wiper fluid. Very straightforward. A series of other buttons that are available here as well. So this is one reason why I think the 300 pack for the Mustang GT and the 24 could be worth it. Because it's got all of the drive modes that weren't available in the 2023 model. So you can go between all of these different modes, which are going to play with traction, stability control, steering, and a few other things. Top of that, you've got your individual steering modes. So there are 3 individual modes there as well. So you've got normal, comfort versus sport steering. On top of that, series of other things. Like this thing has the active valve exhaust system. I'll touch on that in a second. So many things. But you've got your steering wheel mode button there. Voice command prompt. Move through the cluster screen and things like that. Increase, decrease volume. That's really nice. So you've got a few different speaker options that are available inside of this thing, which I'll touch on in a sec. But it's 6, 9, or 12 speakers. Did mention there are 2 different multimedia screens that are available inside of this thing. So it's either going to be this without factory nav or this same screen with factory navigation instead. But if you want a full walkthrough, like you want to know how to use the screen there, move through the cluster screen, or use the steering wheel buttons, you'll find a walkthrough down in the description of this video. But basics, you've got audio, you can easily pair a phone, and then without factory navigation, it's not a big deal because you can still hook up through iPhones to use Google Maps, Apple Maps, or Waze, or you can hook up through Android devices in order to use Google Maps right through this screen. And it's a wireless connection now instead of being wired, which is nice. Series of different settings that are available. So this is just typical Ford styling. A few differences though is that you can adjust the cluster screen now through this screen instead of through the cluster screen itself. And then a few other basics. Big one is going to be when you get into your features mode. You've got basic driver assistance settings, which were available in last year's Sync 3. Some slightly more advanced ones when you get into the adaptive cruise control system. But the big one is the My Mustang mode. So this is something that just wasn't available in anything but the advanced Mustangs, so the 401A or the 201A EcoBoost, or like you've got the Mach 1 and things like that. But you've got track apps that are available. But I mean, look at this: acceleration, brake, lap timer, launch settings, launch control, baby. Line lock as well if you wanted to do burnouts, launch control, rev matching, which you can toggle on or off. Shift indicator points if you wanted help with shifting, because this is the 6-speed manual transmission. But there are so many options, like even your aux gauges. Because inside of last year's Mustang, there were some aux gauges right on the dash itself, versus now aux gauges are built in digitally to the screen, which, I mean, honestly, hold on, look at this. I think that looks so damn nice. And then you can customize these. So if you didn't want the accelerometer, if you wanted different parts, you've got the option of fully adjusting this if you wanted to. On top of that, you've got custom modes. So you've got a series of different profiles you can set up. You can tweak out what's going on with steering, traction control, active exhaust, what you want it to sound like based off of an individual profile. You can adjust your color scheme out for primary, secondary, there would be the option for your color for ambient lighting and some of the higher trims of the vehicle. And then also cluster theme. So you can have it match your drive mode. So I'm in sport mode, so you've got the sport theme. You've also got the option for track mode, calming screen instead, so you just don't get as much information. But this is one of the neat ones. Fox body, 87 and 93. That's pretty neat. I think that's pretty cool. So you can either have it permanently locked out to one of these other modes if you like the look of one over the other, or you can have it just based off of whatever drive mode you're currently in. It's nice, and that's going to be your basics there. And then you've also got the active exhaust system. So there's quiet mode, normal mode, sport, and then track mode. Now this is the 6-speed manual transmission, but with the automatic transmission with active valve, on the key fob you'd have a button you could push if you wanted to sound the active valve system as well. It's pretty neat. This is so cool though. Honestly, like, I do kind of miss the toggle switches that were along the bottom there, but I mean, having everything easily accessible through a pony mode there, it is nice. I think it's, like I said, it's going to take people a little bit to get used to this new setup, but I mean, having everything built in, benefit, downside, obviously if something breaks with the screen, you're kind of SOL with what you can use. And that's even for climate settings, because climate's built right into the screen now instead. But I mean, one of the nice things is that you can use the voice command prompt to be able to change your climate settings. You can navigate using your voice, make phone calls, change radio stations and things like that. Along the very bottom, you've got your push button start with a nice, unique look to it. It's kind of cool. This would be the auto start stop button that you'd find inside of the automatic transmission. Your My Pony mode. On top of that, traction control, 4-way blinkers. There's a custom button that you can set up to do a few different things. So you can have it for launch control, rev match, calming screen, or have it for your exhaust mode. I think honestly, if you have active valve, exhaust mode would probably make the most sense. So all you do is then push this button in order to tweak your exhaust mode instead. Max defroster, turn on your audio. And one cool thing about the audio is that there are so many, like, same thing as last year, a ton of different options that are available. Inside of the Mustang, you're going to find either 6, 9, or 12 speakers, depending on which trim level of the vehicle that you're in. If you're an audiophile, you love your music, you're definitely going to want to go with the option with the 12 speaker Bang & Olufsen. You could always do something aftermarket if you wanted to. And like, really the sound inside of this, hold on, I'm adjusting the settings. So I generally find like the treble down 2 and the bass cranked by 3 gives really good audio. So let's go ahead and play this USB source and you can judge for yourself. This is coming just right out of the microphone, no processing done afterwards at all. And I'm only going to go up to half volume.
Real hard about what you want to be. Step 4. Everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good.
I mean, that is pretty damn respectable for what it is. You can hook up just through Bluetooth if you wanted to just stream audio that way, or you could hook up through Android or iPhone devices. So you set up Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, and you can stream audio that way instead. There are 2 power points, so USB-C, USB Type-A, with the option for a wireless charge pad in some trim levels of the vehicle. There's a 12-volt power point down there. And then this thing, 6-speed manual transmission. Inside of the GT, it still does feature the MT82 D4, so the GetRag D4. You could do a Tremec aftermarket if you wanted to, and then you do get the Tremec when you're inside of the Dark Horse version of the vehicle. One other thing that's missing, parking brake. So it's no longer a manual parking brake inside of the Mustang, so it's an electronic instead. So lift up to turn it on, hit the brake, and push down to turn it off. There is a drift brake available inside of the Mustang as well when you're in the High Performance Package EcoBoost or the GT Performance Package Dark Horse, etc. This thing, just regular cup holders, no ambient light. One interesting thing that was added onto the Mustang though is that the little armrest here, so it's got a little 12-volt power point, but the screen also has the valet mode, which not only locks out the screen, but it also locks out the console, so this little armrest instead as well, I should say. So locks out the screen, locks out the armrest. I just think that's awesome. Really, really nice feature. Got that same kind of metallic, or that same kind of like carbon fiber-y type of highlight there. Nice Mustang along the passenger side. In the Dark Horse, you'd also have a chassis number. So very similar to what you saw in the Mach 1 last year. Auto-dimming rear view mirror is standard pretty much across the board. Basic lights for your cabin control, or controls I should say, for your cabin lights. If you had the convertible, you'd have your convertible button. And then I'd say this, such a disappointment. having your sunglasses holder up there, I mean, it's nice, it's convenient. I just miss having it down there instead. But I mean, you still do have the sunglasses holder, which is typical Ford styling. I just would have really loved to have seen it for the entire lineup back where it used to be. And there's one other small thing. So instead of the glove box in last year's model, there was a little thing right along the very top for the manual, so you could push down for a little release there. This is just your regular glove box now instead. So it doesn't have a little hidden compartment like what you saw last year, unfortunately. Up overhead from there. On the outside, nothing. Inside, a little ticket holder. Vanity mirror with lights built in, so same as always. And then this thing, very Mustang-esque. It goes out just a tiny little bit. But this thing obviously does have a second row. Getting inside of the second row is really, really challenging if you're like taller than 5'6". Like me being 6 feet tall, I'm not fitting in the second row of the Mustang at all. It is really, really tight back there. But here's the thing. I was just in the convertible Mustang, and with the top down, so with the top open, it is actually possible for me to get in the second row, but the driver is going to have their seat forward a little bit in order for it to happen. So there's a little bit of a caveat there. If you wanted people that are taller to sit in the second row of the vehicle, it's pretty much got to be the convertible, unless you've got kids. I've had a few people mention like the flat bottom steering wheel, not super comfortable. I'd never grip the steering wheel from the bottom. Even when I spin the wheel, I never grab it from, I can see maybe what they're talking about, because it's different. It's not a full circular wheel, but the grip on where you're supposed to hold the wheel is actually pretty solid. Even if you're doing two-handed driving, if you're tracking it, it's pretty solid. Personal preference, that's just my thoughts on it, but. Okay, so first kind of feeling on the dynamics of the GT. It's honestly initially, because I haven't really opened it up yet, but initially I would say it's very similar to last year's model. Now this thing does have significantly more horsepower and a little bit more torque in comparison. That's where the GT is, baby. Yeah. Oh, that's nice. That's great. All right, honestly, I love the GT, but there obviously is one glaring downside to the GT Mustang, and that's that the fuel economy inside this thing is just absolutely horrendous. So if you are just using this as a fun weekend car, you don't really care about the cost of gas because you're writing it off anyways, or whatever the case may be, the GT is a good option. But if you're price conscious about the cost of gas, you're going to want to look at the EcoBoost instead. Fortunately with the EcoBoost is that you don't have the option for a 6-speed manual anymore in the 24. You'd have to find a 23 in order to get the 6-speed, which is going to be really tough to find now. Not impossible, but just tough. I got to hold on. Let's have some fun. Nice. That was a look at the 2024 Ford Mustang GT. It is nicely lent out to me by the folks at Formula Ford in Pickering here. So if you're after a Mustang, if you're after any Ford, Lincoln vehicle, whatever the case may be, you definitely want to reach out to these guys and chat with them, because they are going to be able to get you into pretty much any Ford or Lincoln. I think the only thing they can't do is the Mustang GT 500. But outside of that, Ranger Raptors, whatever the case may be, they'll be able to get you into one. That was a look at the 2024 Mustang GT. What'd you think? If you have any questions, drop down in the comments section below and let me know. But if you found this one useful, thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And until I see you next time, take care.